Welcome to the Smith Publicity All Things Book Marketing Podcast, offering tips, insights, and advice from the best in the publishing industry. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Smith Publicity's All Things Book Marketing. I'm your host, Olivia McCoy, and today I have author and president of Author Imprints, David Wogahn, here to talk about book launches. Hi, David.
Good morning.
My colleague Kelly was just telling me how much she enjoyed being on the panel with you at IBPA.
Yeah, that was nice. Publishing University. It's a great event.
Yeah. I'd love if you could start us off by telling us a bit more about your work and how you help authors.
Sure. So Author Imprints, we got started about 12 years ago now, and it's really, I describe it as a outsourced publishing arm for authors. So instead of the author having to hire, go with maybe some other company or manage the process themselves, we manage that process for them. And then the second part of it that I think is a little unique to us is we insist that each author be their own publisher. So if someone wants, and this really comes down, frankly, to an ISBN, is who are you really, what's your brand and what are you publishing? And is it yours or does it belong to someone else, say through a hybrid or traditional? And so ours is that you are in control of all of your accounts and your publishing brand. That's why it's Author Imprints.
That makes sense.
Yep.
It's a very fitting name.
Took a while to figure that name out, but we did.
So then let's start with what makes a successful book launch, using the word successful specifically, and book launch meaning publication day, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think I always tell people what's your goal? And that's really going to determine your success when you evaluate that. You might have just having the book, you're trying to influence people or get the book out into the world, your opinions. That's one thing. Maybe it's to drive your business forward, help other people, entertain. So what are those goals? And that actually flows back to a lot of different things. Pricing, how you market it, the effort you put into it. So there's a whole variety of things that sort of stem from the answer to that question of what is it you want to accomplish by publishing this book?
And what are some metrics that authors can use to measure success then? I mean, you mentioned book sales, but for example, if maybe their goal is entertainment or if their goal is to bring people into their business, how can they measure success for the book that way?
I almost always, just this is conversations with authors, and even speaking as an author myself, you write a book, you want to get it read. Mm-hmm. And I think that I tell people, don't worry about the ROI, at least initially. I think that it's really about because it doesn't make any difference if no one's reading the book. So instead of looking at those margins of what you're making on per book, you're looking at really, how many people are reading it, because everything stems from that. And we may get into this other topic of reviews, which I think are really critical. But, if you have a lot of people reading your book, you're getting a lot of feedback. Those people are going on to write reviews, and that becomes social proof. And there's this sort of, flywheel that takes place the more that you get people reading your book. So, that's one thing. And the other one is the world's big. People don't realize how many readers there are out there. And, there's not just a few hundred or maybe a few thousand. There's tens of thousands of people that might be interested in that book. So, you're not giving up anything by trying to maximize, those margins and that ROI in the first, 2 or 3 months of the release.
So let's jump into reviews, because I do know that most authors that I talk to, they know that reviews are important, but I don't think they always understand how important and kind of what are some goals to set around reviews. So let's talk about where they're useful, why they're useful, and when they're most useful.
Yeah, so I think any discussion about reviews really has to kind of break it into two pieces. One is, or two types of reviews. One would be customer reviews from the public, and the other one would be the editorial, and to use Amazon speak, but an editorial, you can break that down into several other categories as well: testimonials or trade reviews or, media reviews, things of that nature. But usually kind of starting with, frankly, probably the most important for an indie published book, at least, it would be the customer reviews. And getting people to leave those reviews is so critical, especially in the early stages. You really want to get some number up on the board, because that's going to lead to other things and give you opportunities for things like marketing and doing price drop promotions and things like that. So it's really a critical thing to get to focus on those customer reviews out the gate.
I know there was some controversy around Goodreads allowing pre-publication reviews. Book Riot did a whole article on it about how should people be able to leave a review before publication, especially if they haven't read it, because unlike Amazon, who requires you wait until publication or at least show some kind of verification that you're an active part of the community, Goodreads allows anyone to post a review regardless of whether or not they've proof of having read it. But I'm of the belief that it's crucial for authors and for publishing teams to be able to collect those reviews before publication, because they do make so much of an impact right off the gate. When you publish your book on PubDate, you have some kind of buffer of all of this feedback already. And then as a publicist, I actually will pull some of those consumer reviews and use it when I'm pitching media or other consumer reviews like, hey, book is out now. You can purchase it, leave honest feedback wherever you review books. Here's some feedback we're already getting. It seems to be really popular. And it just gives you that boost and something to talk about right around the launch of your book.
As you know, what's happened over the last several decades actually is there used to be a lot of pre-publication reviews. So there's nothing new there. And those were all in the major media, newspapers, magazines, things of that nature. So now you just have it, all online, and it does make sense. I think you have to have that. Amazon's a little different, I think, in the sense that it's a store. So I think it makes sense that it would not happen. You wouldn't be able to get those ratings or reviews until after, people are able to purchase the book. I mean, that's a whole separate discussion. But in terms of Goodreads and other ones like that, these are appearing on blogs, and I completely agree with you. You've got to have something. You've got to have that feedback that you can share with people, and you never know where that's going to come from. It could be just a blogger that made a great statement about the book that could be used, if nothing more than to give us confidence to keep moving forward. That's just really difficult, for in those early stages.
Yeah. Is there a number that authors should be shooting for in that first month of publication, around publication, and then ongoing for reviews?
Oh, any as possible, I suppose. But I would I would think that you really, at least with Amazon, where most of those sales are going to be, is going to, you've got to get that algorithm interested in your book. And so I think, 5 or 10 at least in that first 30-day period. And this too, where you're going to go out and do promotions with it, and you don't want to be advertising a book that has none or just a handful of reviews. You want to have enough social proof there to get an ROI on your investment on the advertising that you're putting into it. It's like, advertising a new restaurant and everybody shows up and there's no one sitting there eating. And so you want some lines around the building.
No, that makes perfect sense. I think I've heard 15 was what I heard a few years ago from someone at Amazon. 15 reviews of 3 stars or higher in the first month. I do think I've heard recently that number was up to like 25 or something. But I do try and encourage like 5 new reviews a month moving forward as like a stretch goal, just to make sure that the algorithm knows that your book is still relevant, people are still interested, and just to have people continuing to comment on it and share it, and ideally word of mouth marketing, share it with their friends and their family and their colleagues.
Yeah, the other thing I think is that it depends on. I think people have to be careful not to beat themselves up about this, and that you need to look at your network, and again, back to the goals and your kind of book, where it is. It might be a super niche book. And if you can get, if you're coming out with let's say a genre fiction book, and 25, 50 reviews is probably what you need to be aiming for, and really to kind of break through. And especially if you're doing a series. If you've got a very, a memoir, and you're not, a well-known personality, it's going to be harder to get those reviews. And so the 5 to 10, 20, are going to be awesome. They're going to be, terrific for that level, let's say, of what it is.
That makes perfect sense. I think you're absolutely right with that. And the quality of review matters too. I've had authors that were a little disappointed with like maybe a 3-star review, but it was a really thorough, like lengthy 3-star review that was detailing like, I really loved this part. I loved this. I had some disagreement with this part here, which is why it's a 3-star, but ultimately I do recommend it for this, or maybe it wasn't my cup of tea, but this. And I'm like, that's amazing. That's the kind of review I want to see as a industry professional, because it shows that they are connecting and really thinking about what you're writing and putting out there.
The other thing about that is that when you get those kind of reviews, especially if they're talking about what that person didn't like, or some other element of it, whatever that review is that you want to attract the people who are right for that book, and then you're going to get the better reviews. And so if you can dissuade somebody from getting the book who maybe not be the perfect fit, then those other reviews are going to trend to be more positive. And there's actually research that's come out on that fact too. A few years ago, there was one report of studying books that got major awards, and before the major award was granted, they had I don't remember the statistic on it, but say 5-star reviews, lots of 5-star reviews. After the award is granted, you have a lot of people going, oh, they got that award, well, I'm going to go check it out. And they realize it's really not for them. And so that percentage of positive reviews would decrease for that particular book. And you can see this with some of the older books that have been out there that are kind of part of our American canon. They don't have 4.8 stars like a lot of say self-published genre fiction books do. And part of that is they're attracting people who maybe not the right reader for that book.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. That speaks to my heart, actually.
Well, you want to tell people. The other thing is that you want to encourage people to be that honest. And I know one specific case where the author asked the reviewer, please change your review down to a 3 from a 4 or something like that, and talk about what you liked or didn't like, or he didn't like something about the book and he wanted to reduce the star because he knew that 3-star review would get more readers than that 5-star review. It kind of gets lost in the whole review profile, I call it.
It's a social proof almost. These are real people leaving their real thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
So then what else should authors be considering in book launch? So we kind of have reviews, which is a piece of marketing and promotion, but I also know production is a huge thing, obviously pre-launch, making sure the editorial, the design, all of that is there. But let's talk distribution a little bit and the different types of options for distribution there are.
Distribution is actually just about the first thing that I'll talk to someone about. In fact, when we're going through, the business development sales process and discussing it with someone, it's, what are your goals? And is this like, they say, an Amazon only release? Do you want to have a longer pre-order period for that? And there's going to be just a few options that are available to indie authors. Traditional is going to be a whole different ball game, or if you have multiple books, you can maybe be available to different distributors. But distribution in today's world for kind of the average indie author is really going to be in 2 places. It's going to be Amazon, or it's going to be Ingram Spark. That's just the most approachable. And so those are going to get you into what you always want to do is be in the Ingram database, and you can get there through either one of those without, we can get in the weeds if you want to, but that's really where you're going to focus on that question. And the other thing that kind of leads into that is, what is the type of book that you're producing? Now, it could be that you're a speaker and you want to produce books in volume because you're going to be using those not through the traditional trade sales channels, but maybe back-a-room sales, or there's some other group bulk sale opportunity. And so printing books, traditionally printing books, offset is going to be very affordable, yet that's going to be probably one of the most complicated things an indie author is going to have to face, is how do you, because you cannot get that book into Amazon or Ingram Spark in a very easy way. Those have to be print on demand. So then it kind of limits your choices to either some kind of distributor, or there's several different, fulfillment type companies that have accounts with Amazon and perhaps with Ingram in order to get that book into that catalog, because you cannot get into it without POD or going through these other options.
I used to work at a bookstore back when I was in grad school, and we actually had our point of sale, like our online website distribution for books where customers could order their books online through the bookshop was actually linked to Ingram. So it would tell you if it was available, if it was in stock or pre-order. So any book that was available on Ingram through Ingram Spark or through traditional Ingram was then automatically available on the bookstore website. And I think that's true of a lot of local smaller bookstores.
Yeah, and that gets back to ISBNs and having those, getting the book into those catalogs. And you want to own that ISBN so that it can be your publisher name on it, and the bookstores are going to be looking at that much more favorably than looking at just, say, a KDP free ISBN release. You're not going to get too many orders, or at least they're not going to be very happy about it at a bookstore. And so as you know, a lot of books aren't, probably the majority of books are not stocked in bookstores, but making it available to the bookstore is really the key. So if you might be able to do a local event or partner with the store in some way, then that really opens the door for you, and you're able to set wholesale settings if you're going through Ingram Spark, that type of thing.
Yeah, those are the magic words. The book is available for order on Ingram. Any bookstore event manager is going to be so pleased to hear that. It just makes their lives so much easier.
One thing that comes up a lot for us is that, the author will say, well, I went to the store and they say, who's the publisher, or where's it? And I tell them, just say it's distributed by Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, that's what they really want to know. And it kind of gets you out of the conversation about imprint name or self-published or something else, and just say, my book is distributed by Ingram. Okay. They go into Ingram, they look, they say, okay, that's the appropriate discount, it's returnable. I'm going to book you in the store, or I can order it for the customer, or whatever it might be, but avoid these other kind of extraneous parts of the conversation.
That makes sense. Easy peasy. Makes it easier for everyone. What is the timeline for a book launch? Because some of these conversations, you said distribution is one of the first conversations you have. So I'm thinking that's pretty far away from a publication date. What would you say is the timeline for a book launch period?
Well, again, back to the author's platform, I think that it really, since they're technically the publisher in this case, if you're doing the indie route, they're going to, have to be, excuse me, concerned about all the non kind of writing related types of things. But you probably want to have at least having your book done maybe 60 days before, 60 to 90 days, having it all complete for that, and being able for you to activate, say, your mailing list or some of the other contact social media to get the word out. What you don't want to do is, this is a kind of a big mistake I see, as people making changes to the book within, say, a 30-day period of its release. And talking specifically about Ingram, and I've come across some very experienced top-selling authors who, one in particular, made uploaded her book that was a draft of, an ARC, and that was the book that was sent to people for pre-orders. And the reason that happens, and Ingram says this, a little bit buried in the site, but they'll say, that when you approve the book for distribution, that means that we can print the book. And you don't get to decide when they print the book, they decide. And it is often decided on customer demand. So if you have that demand, that book could be printed as many as, 30 to 45 days before the publication date. So you definitely don't want to be making those changes. But I say just generally, just so you can relax and be able to reach out to your list and kind of get those reviews, you've got to have it done, 60 to 90 days before.
And that's crucial to have some kind of arc even before then. 3 to 4 months prior to publication is the deadline for those industry reviews, that PW, Shelf Awareness, Kirkus, all of those greatness, they require 3 to 4 months. And so even just having an arc, even if it's not complete, totally fine to submit. Most industry professionals understand that an arc is not the final copy. So you can still work off of that, but do, like you said, get the final copy settled 60 to 90 days in advance of submitting to the distributor. That makes sense, because it is kind of out of our control at that point. There's only a few big giants in the distribution world, so we kind of got to play by their rules.
And so to that point, when you're getting get those other trade reviews and things, and you want that out, let's say maybe starting that process 4 or 5 months prior, because those are going to take 7-9 weeks, is you're going to get it back, and then you've got to get it into the book if you want it to be part of the book, which usually you do, at least the great reviews, and have those all kind of in that production process, perhaps even a forward, and have that bolted into the book so that when you upload it, it's ready to be printed or offset printed or whatever it is. Things that come in later obviously could be up on Amazon or in other websites and things like that. But if you're going to be going that route, you really do have to be planning maybe even 6 months in advance.
And do you recommend that the book is available for pre-order before they really start online marketing to their networks?
I do. There's so many advantages with having that publicly available, and you've probably worked with authors too, and outreach to people who are influencers, and they want to know that the book is real. And having it available on pre-order says, okay, that cover's there, it's not changing, and this is what the book is about, it's real. And the second part of this is that you need to have a link to put on your website or in social media in order to send people to it. And sometimes that takes a little while. It's kind of interesting. I see this taking anywhere from a week to even a month for that to be settled in that distribution process. That technical process is kind of a black box. And so when you input that information, you're kind of out of control at that point. So you have to wait for the stores and everyone to list it as available for sale. So it does take some time. And even with the new 979 ISBNs, Amazon assigns a separate number to those. And so it used to be I could predict what that link would be, but now you can't do that.
Yep, that was a fun change. I remember when the ISBN switched from 978s to 979s, there was a huge to-do about it where Amazon didn't recognize the new ISBNs. And ultimately, for those that aren't super in the niche about the industry, that's just the first 3 numbers of whatever ISBN on the back of the book. We ran out of 978s and we had to move on to the next number, and the whole industry freaked out for about a week or 2.
Yeah. It didn't. I've heard that, and for our customers, there was very little, if any, impact on it. I saw that resolved.
That's good.
Quickly. Yeah, they just assigned an ASIN, Amazon serial number to it. But yeah, my concern was that, and still is, that people, and this is really important, that number series has nothing to do with indie publishing. It's just a new number series. And in time, you're going to see all the major publishers, everyone else using those numbers. But we have this sort of temporary period, and there's, sometimes a stigma with some people about that self-publishing. So I'm just making it clear to anyone that listens that has nothing to do with indie publishing.
Noted. Thank you for clearing that up. And then I'm going to combine a couple questions here, because because you mentioned activating networks prior to publication. And so I know there are several pieces. You mentioned author mailing list. On your website, it talks about how online marketing is a critical success factor. That's the term, the CSF. Can you go into what that means to activate a network and what it could look like?
Sure. I describe it in very simple terms that you need to have an ABC list.
Okay.
And so the way I define that out is your A list are those people who you hope would you're going to approach about writing a testimonial or endorsing your book. Maybe a forward writer would fit in that category. That's going to be a pretty short list, generally, for some people. The B list of people are what I'd call influencers. And these are people who are going to activate their network. And then the C list are people you hope will buy your book. And so if you've been around a while and you have a mailing list, that's probably most of the people on that list are going to be in what I call the C category. And some of those people might be part of a launch team and would call the Bs, and your As. Usually those are all people you know pretty well, or you would approach those people because they are familiar with the topic of your book, and your audience would be familiar with them. So that's how I break it out, is, start creating that ABC list, before the book is published. Before the book is even finished. You should know certainly what the A's are, because it gets back to the timeframes we were talking about. You've got to be approaching those folks, 6 months prior. It takes a while for them to, first of all, you have to reach them. They have to decide whether or not to do it. You got to have a book ready to send them in whatever format they want. And then they might take 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, depending on who they are and their other agenda and who you are, how they perceive you. So, those things all take that time. And the B, I think, is a little bit harder for some people, just because you may not know a lot of influencers. And there's some other ways perhaps to work around that with blog tours and things. And of course, with publicity, that's where you're going to be. Yes. I'll spread that back to you.
Yeah. No,
Who's
that's
on your B
great.
list?
We've got so many lists. I just was
Yeah.
doing follow-ups to a B list for an author today. I think it was 800 follow-up emails that I sent out. But ABC, I like that. I haven't heard about that before.
Okay. Well, for new authors, it kind of crystallizes things. Oh, ABC, I get it, right? Just don't overcomplicate things. There's too many things to learn and use as it is. And it actually gives people a way to think about other resources that they might need. And so that, like I say, the B is where you say, okay, we probably going to have to call Smith Publicity for that.
And where do you have resources that authors can access through Author Imprints?
We have a ton of resources. We have a learning center. It's just authorimprints.com/learn. And there's a whole bunch of stuff there, all free, a monthly newsletter that's free. Been pretty popular, been blogging for over 10 years. So there's a lot of really great articles that are in the nuts and bolts of this process.
And we'll link the website down in the description so anyone can access that super easily and navigate to those resources. Thank you for those. Where else can our listeners and watchers get in touch and learn more?
Well, one thing I'm very proud of is we have a workbook that we've created that is a combination. I have several books, and I've took what I would consider to be a lot of the key information for what I call Countdown to Book Launch, and that's the title of this. And it has, it's about 206 pages currently, and it's available for people who, we find a lot of people that say, well, I want to manage it myself. They may want to go hire somebody to do the typesetting or program the ebook, or they'll set up the distribution themselves, and that's fine. This is the kind of book that isn't so much, it has a bunch of how-to, but there's also a lot of why you want to do things and what it is that you want to do. and it walks you through those kind of 5 areas: preparation, registration, Amazon, reviews, and release. So that's also there too.
So it covers everything.
Well, we try, you can't, yeah, I think it covers probably about 80 to 90% of what you need to be thinking about when you launch the book, kind of the core requirements. And that's also at authoриmprints.com/countdown.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a pleasure speaking with you.
I've enjoyed it. I hope everyone learned something today. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to All Things Book Marketing. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and send it to anybody else that might be interested. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Smith Publicity All Things Book Marketing Podcast. To reach us and learn about our many services, visit smithpublicity.com or send us an email to info@smithpublicity.com.